I had always believed that real upheavals in life came with loud shouts or sharp scandals. But it turned out that, for me, everything began with something completely insignificant. With the glint of a tiny piece of foil lying on the bathroom mat. When I walked into the bathroom that morning, I did not turn on the light. There was only a narrow beam of sunlight cutting through the dimness and falling across the floor. That beam made the tiny round piece of foil immediately catch my eye. I stopped instinctively, worried I might step on something sharp or dangerous. Vanessa had not mentioned losing anything, but that was nothing unusual in our home. Small things often ended up where they did not belong. I crouched down to examine the shiny fragment. It was a small foil membrane about the size of my pinky nail. One side of it was empty, and on the back there was a clearly printed word: Tuesday. Tuesday. That tiny detail made me freeze. Because today was Wednesday, which meant that this foil had once sealed a pill someone had taken yesterday. And it definitely was not me. I did not take any regular medication, and at 35 the strongest thing I used occasionally was aspirin. I was sure Vanessa did not take anything daily either. We both had medical checkups just a few weeks ago, and the doctors told us we were perfectly healthy. So what was this Tuesday pill foil doing in our bathroom? At first I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe it was just a piece of trash. Maybe something had fallen out of a pocket or bag. But the feeling of discomfort was already spreading deep inside me. The only daily pills that had ever been in our home were Vanessa's birth control. She had taken them for years, until we decided once and for all that we did not want any more children. I had a vasectomy so she could stop taking hormones. She had said exactly that. She did not need the pills anymore. And now, here in my hand, was a piece of foil that looked exactly like the old packaging. A cold, very clear fear ran through me. If she was back on birth control, there were only two possible reasons. Either she was afraid of an accidental pregnancy because my vasectomy had failed, or she was afraid of getting pregnant by someone else. Years ago, I would have asked her directly without thinking of the consequences. But now something in me advised caution. Maybe it was the professional habit of being systematic and double-checking. Years of engineering work had taught me not to draw conclusions from a single data point. I put the foil back exactly where it had been, making sure it looked untouched, and drove to work. On the way, my thoughts tangled and piled up on one another, but there were no answers. At work I could not focus on emails or projects. Instead, I opened a search engine and started reading about at-home DNA tests, small hidden cameras, and phone cloning apps. It felt disgusting, beneath my idea of who I was, but I could not afford to act blindly. If Vanessa was being unfaithful, I needed to know for sure. And even more painfully, I needed to be certain my children were really mine. We had two little ones, James, who was 5, and 3-year-old Sonia. I had always seen them as a part of me, as my own continuation. And the thought that all of it could be built on a lie started eating at me. If she had hidden the pills, what else might have been hidden? I hit the order button with the same feeling someone would have pulling a trigger in the dark. Audio recorders, cameras, a phone cloning app, DNA test kits. I felt sick from my own actions, but I kept telling myself, truth matters more than comfort. The days dragged on painfully slowly. I began watching Vanessa more closely. She was exactly the same as always, smiling, calm, following her usual routines. No changes in her clothes, no extra trips, no unusual calls. Even in our intimate life there was neither distance nor sudden passion. Everything went on in the same familiar, almost mechanical rhythm. If she was cheating, she was doing it extremely well. On Friday all my orders arrived. I came home early, while the nanny was busy with the kids, and began installing the cameras. In the bathroom, in the living room, and in our bedroom. That evening, after we put the kids to bed, I discreetly collected the DNA samples. James and Sonia laughed. They thought I was just playing a game. Then I took my own swabs. I packed everything and mailed it to the lab. When Vanessa came home, we talked about ordinary little things, but for me, something in our conversations had shifted. I felt like a stranger next to her. While she was in the shower, I placed a recorder in her car and installed the phone cloning app. But there was nothing. No suspicious messages, no calls, no hints. Either I was wrong, or she was much more cunning than I ever imagined. Saturday and Sunday passed on autopilot. Morning walks, chores around the house, the same routine sex without even a trace of emotional closeness. On the outside, it looked like a normal family life, but inside I felt stretched thin, like a string about to snap. On Monday, as soon as Vanessa left for work, I pulled the memory cards from the cameras and sat down with my laptop. What appeared on the screen made me freeze. The bathroom camera showed it clearly. Every morning she took a small white pill. There was no doubt, she was back on birth control. A cold, crushing tightness settled in my chest. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. But something else hurt far worse. The footage from the bedroom showed that on Saturday evening, while I was in the kitchen making dinner, she had taken a shower, then pulled an unfamiliar phone from under a stack of books. Not the one I had cloned. She typed a quick message to someone, then walked over to the air conditioner vent, opened the cover, and hid the device inside. A second phone, hidden. In that moment, everything clicked. The reason her main phone was spotless. She simply didn't use it for anything she actually wanted to keep secret. I realized I needed access to that device as well. That evening, while she was showering again, I opened the vent from Sonia's side of the room, carefully pulled out the phone, cloned everything, and placed it back exactly as it had been. My chest was pounding so hard my hands barely did what I told them to. The next morning at the office, as soon as I opened the data, my vision went blurry, my eyes filled with tears. Everything I had feared was right there in front of me. Messages with explicit details, hotel arrangements, descriptions of scenes that made my throat close up. And the jokes, cruel, mocking, about how I had no idea. They scheduled their secret meetups whenever I was away on business trips. There was no name mentioned, no affectionate nicknames, no personal details, but that silence was its own clue. Everything suggested the man worked with her, and they were intentionally avoiding anything identifiable. I sat there, crying, and for the first time in years, I heard absolutely nothing around me. That's when Michelle walked into my office. My secretary, always composed, older than me, endlessly professional. She said she came because I wasn't answering my phone. She saw me shattered, and instead of asking questions, she quietly closed the door, handed me tissues, and simply said, "Tell me." I started talking. First in fragments, then in full detail. The foil, the cameras, the second phone. She listened without judgment, without shock, without theatrics. And when I told her about the DNA tests, she just nodded, steady and serious. "You need to know," she said calmly. "You can't make any kind of plan without the truth." After a brief pause, she advised me to disappear from the house for a few days, so Vanessa wouldn't sense a shift in my behavior. Then she arranged an urgent, business trip for me to Portland. She handled everything with precision, almost military-like. No extra words, no panic, just structure and logic. In the state I was in, thinking clearly on my own was impossible, and her cold rationality felt like a lifeline. Next, she took me to one of her contacts, a divorce attorney named Lorraine, a woman who looked like she'd been through hundreds of cases just like mine and had long since stopped being shocked by anything human beings do. She laid out 3 options. Ignore everything and stay married, negotiate a peaceful separation, or go in with maximum force. Document the infidelity, file every possible claim, and make sure Vanessa faced the harshest legal consequences. I chose the third option immediately. While the lawyers prepared the filings, I handled the financial side. My business partner Robert was planning to sell part of his share in the company. I bought it, transferred the money into the business, and legally became nearly assetless. It felt dirty, but the prenup allowed me to protect myself. On Monday, the attorney filed everything: the divorce, and a lawsuit against the company where Vanessa's lover worked. At 10 in the morning, all documents were delivered. I sat in my office waiting to see who would call first. The phone rang minutes later, but it wasn't Vanessa. It was my mother. Her voice was trembling. "Gary, what are these papers? Did you read them?" "I did, and I can't believe it. This is Vanessa. She's the mother of your children." "They're not my children," I said quietly but firmly. "They are yours in every way that matters," she insisted. "Are you really going to abandon them?" "Mom, stop. You're punishing the kids for her sins. That's your choice, to stay involved with them. Mine is made." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. It was Vanessa. "Gary, we need to talk. I'm coming home." I didn't answer. I just ended the call. Michelle stepped inside. Clearly she had stayed nearby, anticipating that after everything I had heard and seen, I might simply fall apart. Her embrace was quiet, restrained, yet strangely steadying. I stood there feeling hollow inside, trying to understand what was left of my entire life. From outside I heard a car pulling away. My phone kept vibrating non-stop in my pocket. Calls, messages, alerts. But I didn't touch it. For the first time in many days, I just wanted to disappear, erase myself from reality, freeze everything that was happening around me. But Michelle, always rational and unshakable, reminded me of the steps that still had to be completed. We needed to finish things with HR, finalize the financial freezes, begin the legal procedures. She said all of this calmly, in her steady voice, like someone keeping me afloat. Several more hours passed before I received the email. Vanessa had filed for a protective restraining order against me, supposedly for emotional harm. A document that, in effect, barred me from entering my own house until a court decision. It was an obvious move by her lawyer, an attempt to paint her as the victim. But Lorraine reacted immediately. The judge reviewed the materials and threw out the order. There was simply too much evidence that I was the one who had been deceived and betrayed. After that, Vanessa moved in with her parents. Bill, meanwhile, lost his job. His company found out about the affair with a subordinate and about the 2 children he had fathered with her. Lawsuits began, scandals, disciplinary investigations. Eventually his employers paid me a substantial settlement. Bill himself also had to compensate me, enough for me to pay off my retirement loan. But instead of relief, I felt a strange emptiness. What hurt most was losing James and Sonia. I still loved them, but I could not look at them without seeing Bill's facial features in my mind. Every time it hit me harder than any words could. Maybe I really was weak, but seeing them became unbearable. Vanessa begged me to stay in the children's lives. She tried to persuade me, pleaded with me. But I couldn't. Not in the state I was in. Weeks passed. Then a month. I sold the house. At a loss, but I sold it. Living in a place where every corner reminded me of lies was impossible. I temporarily moved in with Michelle, into her spare room. We behaved politely, carefully, as if trying to feel out a new version of sharing space. She remained professional at work, but outside of work she constantly, though subtly, kept an eye on how I was doing. The day the divorce became official is when I remember down to the smallest detail. I was sitting in my office when they brought in an envelope from the court. I opened it and saw the final decree. One sheet of paper that erased 9 years of my life. I was free, formally cut off from Vanessa, and somehow the feeling mixed both relief and pain. Not long after, my phone rang. It was Michelle. "Bill Wainwright is dead," she said. "His wife caught him with Vanessa again, and shot him." I froze, needing a second to process what I had just heard. The irony hit me with such force that I could not find any words. The 2 children he had fathered behind my back were now left without a father. Was that justice, or just another twist in the tragedy? I did not know, but I did not feel any sorrow. "You could not ask for a more fitting ending," I whispered. I expected Michelle to judge me for saying that, but she only nodded, short, firm, without condemnation. She walked into my office with another envelope. "This is the last payment from Bill," she said. Inside was a check. An amount that completely cleared my debt. I exhaled. The way a drowning man does when he finally stops sinking but is not yet sure whether he can stand on solid ground. My marriage was over. The illusion of fatherhood shattered. Bill was dead, and I was financially free, though in a way that could hardly be called normal. Michelle closed the door, stepped closer, and kissed me. Suddenly, sharply, decisively, without a trace of hesitation. My heart felt like it exploded in my chest from the tension and the sheer unexpectedness of the moment. She smiled as she pulled back. "For 9 years I stood by your side and watched you hold yourself together. You are the most honest man I have ever known. And you never once crossed a line, even when you were at your lowest. I have been waiting a very long time, Gary. If you let me, I will show you that not all relationships are doomed, and not all women lie." In my mind, I flipped through our 9 years together. Her professionalism, her support, her blunt honesty, her loyalty. And I realized that maybe I simply had not wanted to see what was right in front of me. I remembered Dr. Harrington's words, that vasectomies can often be successfully reversed. A tiny spark lit up inside me, something I had not felt in a long time: hope. Fatherhood, perhaps, was not gone forever. I looked at Michelle, still overwhelmed by her kiss, and asked, "What do you think? How many kids should we have?" She laughed softly, warmly. "At least 2, she said. "But let us not rush. Let us see where this goes." In that moment, I understood. My life had been destroyed down to its foundation, but for the first time in a long time, I saw not emptiness ahead, but possibility. A new chapter. The future was uncertain, but I no longer felt trapped. I had finally gotten closure, legal, emotional, personal. Part of me would always ache for the children I once believed were mine. But beside me stood someone who had proved her loyalty not with words but with years. I nodded. Michelle kissed me again. That was the end of my old life, and the beginning of a new one, without illusions, without lies. Maybe a broken heart is simply the price of freedom, and maybe that price is, in its own way, fair.